Today we're going to be talking all about building an effective application based off of what we have seen work over the years, as well as feedback we've gotten from our last artist survey, which was in 2018. We'll be doing another one in this coming fall. I believe we'll also do an administrator one as well, so keep a lookout for that as we get there. We're going to spend most of our webinar within the event editor. And so the first tab that everyone sees, and I'm sure both of you had already seen, is the event information page. Some helpful tips that we see are always upload a logo, of course. It helps your festival stand out. It helps people know what type of festival you have. Obviously, it's probably a logo and not a picture of lilacs like mine is. The logo should be JPEG, and it should be no larger than 300 pixels. The biggest I believe it can be is actually 600 pixels before it starts to push the Apply to This Show button off the page. However, this won't be as much of an issue once we launch mobile, which will be happening in the next few weeks or a month or so, at which point the site will be, the artist side will be mobile responsive, so we won't deal with things where buttons are being pushed off the page. But a good rule of thumb is the best size is around that 600 pixel mark. And a size that always works is 300 pixels. And of course, logos work best if they are horizontal images. So when it comes to show names, you may have experienced some of our sort of regulations before, but we never allow, not never, we typically don't allow numbers at the beginning of the show name. So we don't do things like 34th annual or first annual or anything like that, or 2019 at the beginning. This just makes sure that when artists sort for your event on the participating events and apply to shows page, they get to actually sort it alphabetically. And if you have a number here at the beginning, it pulls it to the top. The exceptions to this rule are if the number is part of your event name. So like 4th Street Art Festival, we would not ask you to move 4th Street to the end of the organization name. Some things to keep in mind when you're deciding what to name your event. Short and sweet is usually better because it's just quicker. Like the quicker artists can get the idea of what your show is, the better. So short and sweet, and you can include things like the season of your show, or if it's like a show type, so fine art festival, craft art festival, things like that. The reason including the year at the end is something that can work is because artists have more faith in shows that have reoccurring years. Not that you're necessarily that much of a disadvantage if you haven't gone on for as many years, but if you do have that ability to add what annual you're on, it can be really good to put it there. So you have to have an event email. There has to be a way for artists to contact you. So just make sure that the event email is the email you want to receive messages at. So if you have an artist liaison or an artist relations person, that might be the event email to put here, where you might give your administrative email to us, say, so that we can reach out to you for administration issues, whereas artists can reach out for their artist representative. This is the email that artists will see on our site. With the event phone number, this is something that is totally optional to display, but again, transparency is something that artists really look for in every single event. So if you have a good phone number for artists to reach out to, maybe it's, again, like an artist relations, artist liaison type person who is there to deal with that sort of thing, that can be really good to put there. You may have noticed recently we added the ability for you to add an Instagram URL. So as always, connecting with artists on social media can help build your rapport with them so that they're more likely to both apply to your show. And then, of course, the goal is one day that they turn around and recommend your show to other of their friends, and you build sort of a really nice, loyal following that way. So social media is really good for that. And Instagram is, of course, where most of our artists like to be. Though we do have a fair amount on Facebook, but just in general, Instagram is very art friendly. If you're collecting checks, having a mailing address is really vital. It's also good just for artists to know where you're located. All of this stuff is pretty self-explanatory. What shows up for artists is going to be your application deadline and your event start and end dates. Except invitation and purchase deadline, which is right here, only shows up on the ZAPP shop and only if you've overwritten it. So now that we get more into the nitty-gritty prospectus sections, we have a couple options. So you have this event summary, as you know, that shows up on participating events. So I'll go ahead and bring participating events up right now. So this is where all the events are listed. So they're automatically listed by event name. You can see that this one's at the top because of quotation marks, and then we have a few that are numbers, and then it goes into the more alphabetized ones. And when you drop this down, this is your event summary. You get the past deadline and show past, and the event summary is right here. So that's your event summary. It's kind of your place to advertise your show on ZAPP. So this is where that listing comes in handy. So anything you want to have in there that would appeal your site to artists. So it's just important to keep in mind that this is where you're talking to artists. So this is where you might want to mention your attendance numbers, your average sales, it's like your sales pitch. So artist statements, anything like that, where you might feel like that information will pull artists into your event. Things like kids' activities, music, those things are great for your website, but they're not as appealing to artists. So this usually works better if it's only artist focused. So then we get into general information. So this is kind of the longer version of what your event prospectus is. So it can include all of the details about your show. A lot of artists appreciate kind of like a communication timeline, which is what I've written out here, where you have kind of like application opens, application deadlines. We will eventually be putting the application open date on the site. It just isn't there right now. So as a good preemptive measure, you can put the application open date in your general information so that artists who go there before your application is open know when it will be, so that they can plan for that. Having jury dates and a jury notification date, we hear again and again from artists that a jury notification date is really important to them. So if you don't have that easily available on your general information or within your event prospectus, it's something to consider. I've also included kind of a communication timeline that again includes that jury notification as well as any additional notifications that may need to happen, including an artist packet, if that's something you're looking at. Of course, you might want to include important dates, anything like that, some general medium categories and what each one means for your show in particular. Ways you're marketing the show, again, makes your show more appealing to artists if they know there's a big marketing effort or even a small marketing effort or just a marketing effort happening to make sure they're attendees to your show. Having that in this section can be really, really useful, as well as any frequently asked questions so that they can just go there to see it. And your event prospectus is on ZAPP basically from the moment you choose to put it live to when you renew your application and we archive and copy it. So once we archive and copy it, your show is disabled on ZAPP. It won't be on participating events anymore. But as soon as it goes live again, then it will go up again. And your show won't be disabled before your event is over. So your event has to be over, then you'll renew your contract, edit it, and then it can go back up. So if artists have frequently asked questions, maybe this could become a resource for them as they go through there. Any additional policies you have, if you want to put some jury information in here that's just kind of free form, you can do it here. We're also going to talk about our jury details page, which is totally optional, but if you want to do some more freeform stuff, you can put it, or detailed information, you can put it in here. Event information, awards are always really good to have in there if you offer them. Again, just more incentives for artists to apply is kind of what you're always looking for. So rules and regulations, pretty self-explanatory. Any rules you may have, the original, they must be handcrafted, they can't be replicas, things like that can go in your rules and regulations. The booth information is just all about transparency in this section. What your booth costs are, because they won't be able to see them until they're invited to the show. So what your booth costs are, what the spaces look like, what options do they have for like a double booth, a corner booth, all of those things, cancellation policies. This helps protect you and the artist so that everybody knows what's happening. Setup and tear down. This is also something we got from our past survey that artists like to know when setup and tear down is. If you're not including that earlier on, so if you're not including that information, it might be something to consider, as well as booth security. And then, of course, the legal agreement is what every artist has to agree to before they can move on and actually fill out your application. And so if you want to include refund policies in here, you're also welcome to do that. That just, again, it protects you and the artist so that everybody is on the same page and everybody has agreed to this document. The one thing about the legal agreement that we always mention, and I will always continue to mention, is that it cannot be edited after your event goes live, particularly after an artist has applied. So as soon as somebody has accepted this legal agreement, really cannot be changed. So we don't really recommend ever changing it once your show is public facing, once your application is public facing. So it's the only section that cannot be edited after you go live. Everything else, you run into something, you realize you forgot it, you realize you have the wrong date, that can all be edited, and we do our best to check for the dates and things like that, just so that nobody goes live with a show that says their 2018 show in 2019. We do our best, but we don't catch all of them, so it's always a good idea to just look for inconsistent dates. So these options down here, you don't really have to worry about this one, but booth assignments to artists, these aren't really part of your application series, but they're on this page, so I want to point them out. So booth assignments to artists, if you do insert booth numbers into ZAPP, you'll want to make sure this is active so that artists see it. You can also disable it if you're not sure that your booth assignments are confirmed. You can disable it until you're ready for it to show on ZAPP, but as soon as you're ready for artists to see it, you can make it active. Same goes for waitlist numbers. We can come back to the display slideshow images if anybody is interested, but this is basically what controls what you look at if you're in the admin slideshow. So then, of course, you want to save your work frequently. And you also have the ability to preview your application, and you can kind of see what it looks like. So now I can see that like this button is still here. These are my social media icons. This is basically what artists will see when they come to my page. So any formatting, I can double check that it works here and that I like how it looks, colors, things like that. We don't recommend a ton of colors in here just because it can get a little hard to read. But if you want to include some like application deadline, or if you're posting a late application maybe, that might be stuff to consider putting in there. So a lot of shows gloss over this, but again, from our feedback from artists, this is kind of an important section. A lot of them click on that link, and when they don't see anything, they get kind of concerned. They just kind of want to know some more information. So you have the ability to choose any method of way you're jurying, how applications are sorted, how many jurors you have, what's your jury panel like, how do they score, how many artists are selected, and how many applications do you receive. And the one thing I want to mention about this page, outside of the fact that it's completely optional, is that every option is also completely optional. So it's not an all or nothing situation. If you want to let artists know, how you're jurying your event, but you don't necessarily want them to know how many jurors you have or exempt from jury artists, if you don't want to let them know that information, you can just leave that section blank and it won't show up on your jury details page. But you can still have some information without having all of it. And that's the one thing I really want to say there. Again, when you're done with that, you can preview it or you can hit save. So always save. Then you have the application editor, so you need to have a medium category in order to go live. If you don't have a show that's juried by medium category, or if you don't really need to know what medium category each artist is, you can just choose all. You can just have a medium category that says all medium categories. Once an artist has chosen the medium category you have written in here, you no longer have the option to delete it, but you can delete any of them up until the point where an artist submits an application with one. So that's why all of these are grayed out, but this one is blue. So when we come down to our application custom questions, this is where you have a lot of room to really make the application your own and make sure you're getting the information that you want to get out of your application. Basically, we have 5 different types of question types. We have a text question, a checkbox question. So that's your multiple choice. If you want an artist to choose more than one option, you're going to want to choose the checkbox. Text is going to be kind of open response. Radio button is a single select. Drop down is also a single select. Informational only, a lot of times we see this used for things that people want to make sure artists are reading, or if you want to say something about the media samples you want, so the images you want. A lot of people choose to have their last question be an informational only question so that you can have that be the last thing they read before they worry about the images being selected. So types of questions you can ask that are interesting to ask and will help you kind of gather information that could help you maybe in your next show cycle or maybe this one is, how did you hear about this event? This is really helpful for finding out whether or not your marketing techniques are working. I think I might have one on here, maybe not. But social media handles is another one, so you can connect with your artists that way. Since all of these are downloadable, you can get all of these in an Excel sheet that then you can sort of sort and filter however you'd like. But marketing efforts are usually one. If you have a student or emerging artist program, that can usually be a single select radio button question is normally how we see those. Any booth requests can be put in here. If you are serving lunch or something like that, that could even be a question that you put in there. Will the booth require electricity, parking pass information, or will you need a parking pass? any medical needs. And then one of the ones that we're hearing a bit lately with sort of, a rise in more mobile technology is that a lot of people don't have home phones, but some do, but they prefer their cell phone. The number they list on ZAPP might not have been updated to their cell phone, so a lot of people have started asking a cell phone question. So we can make one right now. I'm going to go ahead and make it a text box. Just going in here, and then it would be like, what is your cell phone number? And then I'd probably put a caveat in here that's like, this will be used to contact you during the festival. Maybe with emergencies, or maybe with, some additional location information, parking information, anything like that. So if you want to make sure you have the number that they'll have with them at the festival, you can always just add this question there. So it's really about thinking how you can tailor these application questions to your own event. So I'm going to leave this as 0, and I'm going to go ahead and require this question. This information only, if you haven't been using it, creates the help link. So if you're asking for pricing information or whatever, or something like that, you might include something that says this information will be used in such and such way. Or I could have put the little, like, this will be used to contact you at the festival. I could have put that as a help link, but I'm not going to right now. So that's kind of the application questions. So right here, you can go ahead and move these questions into whatever order you'd like. For the ones that have more than one option, you have the option to change how many options you're using. And then you just go ahead and hit update question order. It's kind of the save button on this page. For number of images, this is where you choose the number of images you want to collect, as well as whether or not you want a booth shot. If you don't want one, you can always disable this. And then the display is what your juries will see. So if you're hosting a monitor jury and you're collecting 5 images, you might, for example, want to have the display be 5 images per row. So they're seeing them all in a row on a preview page, rather than sort of 2 on one row, 2 on another, and 1 at the bottom. So if you're looking to change the display of the monitor jury scorecard, the page where they score, as well as the preview page, if you're using it, this is where you will do that. All right. So on to the product editor. So when we look at the product editor, the one that's always required is the application fee. Artists can't submit their application without paying a fee. If you have a $0 application fee for whatever reason, you just change the cost to $0 and they check out a free product. There is no quantity for the application fee. It's kind of unlimited. And you may have noticed, you may not have, but you now have the option to choose only check if you'd like to include, and if you'd like to collect only checks. This is part of a recent enhancement that we did, which changed the purchase workflow a little bit, just to a sort of PayPal's new preferred processor in a way. So now you have the option to select only check if that's something you're interested in. So since we're talking mostly about the application fee today, we're not going to go into too many of these unless you want to at the end, but we're going to focus in on the jury fee. So while the jury fee needs to be active the entire time, what you can do if you have sort of multiple rounds of application fees, so say you have an early bird application fee, and then a normal application fee, and then a late application fee, rather than create all of those products, you're going to just stick with this one product at the top. It is the only product type that allows artists to check out. An admin fee will not allow them to check out. And you don't really want to be in a situation where they think they've paid for an application fee, but they haven't. So you'll always just update this when you want to change the cost of the fee. So I think with an early bird, the best way to do that is to just do it as a coupon. So what you can do is, so first we're going to save it, so it's $20. And then what you can do is you can actually put the early bird coupon in your general information, and you can just put that kind of anywhere you'd like, and you can actually set it to expire on the date at which you no longer want the early bird to function. And this just helps you have an exact cutoff date rather than when you happen to check. So right here, let's just add an early bird. Say it's 20% off. It can be used an infinite amount of times, so 0, and then I'll just have it be early bird 2019 or something like that. Say my early bird goes for a month, so until September 15th, I can just do that. Want to make sure that I select the application fee for the early bird, and then add it. So this coupon will be expired at midnight on September 15th, or 11:59 p.m. on September 15th. And you'll be able to see how many coupons are redeemed. And then you can just make it public and then say the morning of September 15th when you get into work or you look at your application, you can just take the early bird 2019 code off of your page, but you won't have to worry about people using it on September 16th. So it kind of just allows you to have a little bit more freedom that way, as well as not having to worry about emailing artists with the early bird fee or having them reach out to you for the early bird coupon, or changing the application editor the product editor in any way. Because the other option is that you do it all manually and you say, all right, I'm going to take 20% off of $20, and I'm going to change the description to be the early bird application fee. And then on the morning of September 16th, I'm going to get in there and I'm going to change it to a normal application fee. Coupon's just a little bit more of an automated way of handling this for you. Late fees are a little bit different. Those you will need to do manually. So a lot of times what we see is when an application does a late fee period, first they will say that on their event information that they're planning on doing that, and here's what the late fee will be, to also encourage artists to therefore pay for the early bird or the normal application fee. But for the late fee, we could say, okay, this is going to be $30, and it's going to be the late application fee. And I'm going to go ahead and save that. But a lot of times what happens is it'll almost be considered a second round of applications. So some administrators will let their deadline pass. So say our deadline was the 12th for the normal application fee. So we let everybody with the 12th in, and then the application closes for a period of time, and then maybe it reopens on the 15th and it goes through the 29th with a higher application fee. And so long as you explain all this in your event perspective, you shouldn't run into any issues of artists feeling like that's unfair for them to have, applied earlier or something like that. So long as you have full transparency, doing this can be really simple and easy way for you to handle your application cycle, particularly if you're doing something like an early bird, normal, and late application fee, or if you want to try something like that in the future. This is how ZAPP does it. And, say you do want to try something like that in the future and you can't remember everything I just said in this, you can always, of course, email us and we'd be happy to walk you through that. The last thing I wanted to point out today was just going to be that admin slideshow. So the admin slideshow I briefly mentioned within the event information section. So it lives down here, and this just allows you to see the images of artists like that. And then you can go ahead and select any disciplines that you may need, jump to those, and it just allows you to see, like, at a snapshot view, what you're looking at for each application number. Some administrators also use this if they want their jurors just to look through the images, say like 5 at a time or however many you're collecting at a time. You can go through together and just view this slideshow. So you have the option to see these one at a time or to view all their thumbnails. That exists. Now with that context, we'll go back and look at it. That exists down here, and it's display slideshow images, and I have mine set to thumbnails. But if you want to see one at a time, you can set it to large image, and then you can go through each artist image one at a time. It's just up to you. It's a way of just sort of managing applications.
I did have a couple of questions in the general information where you put the booth information. Can you upload a picture of what a booth looks like into one of those boxes?
Right now, you can't upload an image easily, but if you have anybody who knows code of any sort, you can sort of look into doing that. I can show you what that would look like. We have an event, a series of events that do that have kind of customized their application in a specific way. So some events can put images in there. You just have to kind of work with it and source it outside. If you want to shoot us an email asking, we can kind of look and see if there's like an easier, like kind of an easy code way to do it, but you could probably just Google how to sort of code an image into what we have is called a CK editor, but it's not easy right now, but it's technically possible.
Okay. And then when you were going over the coupons, you mentioned there was a time limit. Is everything set on Mountain Time?
No, so it will be set on whatever your event is set to.
Okay.
You set your event time zone within the event information. So mine's set to Mountain Time, but you could choose any of these times to set your coupons to as well.
Okay. And then where the artist, if you have artist images that you'd like to increase the allotted space that they can put in, I don't know how to say that. Like, we really need to have much higher resolution images. Is there a way to put that in there?
Not yet. I can write that down. I think you might have asked this before, or somebody asked this recently.
Yeah, I did ask it, and I think somebody said that I could put it in the prospectus, but I want to make sure that if I put it in writing, that there's actually a place for the artist to upload higher resolution images.
So artists can upload images up to 5 megabytes per image, which is usually really high resolution, but we can't make it a requirement because of the way the uploading process works, and a lot of artists struggle with the current requirements, which are 1400 pixels. But again, I think putting it in writing, which I believe one of my colleagues mentioned to you, is probably your best bet. We just can't require it without facing a lot more struggles from artists, at least at this time.
Yeah, so where does that information live? Or where do you think it would be a good place to put that?
So I think since it's really important to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I think I'd include something within the rules and regulations, because it would be a rule that it needs to be within a certain pixels or quality level. And then what I would also do is add an application question that is a radio button with one option that's about photo resolution or image resolution, however you want to phrase this, really.
Right.
And I'd build a new question, and I'd say, okay, I, the artist, confirm that the images I'm submitting meet the resolution requirements.
Okay.
And then since you can require the question, and then the only option can be yes. I'm just going to leave the question half-formed and show you what that would look like. So since I put it at the end, when I go ahead and preview this, it'll be the last option I have before I select my images. And since it'll also be in the prospectus, they'll know that before they select their images. But this can just kind of do a little bit of that work for you and say, you'll have them say at least that they've read that and that their images meet those resolution requirements. That'll probably be the most thorough way to do it.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Anyone have any other questions? No? All right. So if you come up with any other questions, or if you are thinking about this later and you have some questions, you can always email us at zaphelp@weststaff.org, or you can submit a ticket right here, and we'll be able to get back to you later with that information. So thank you so much for coming.